Hello and welcome to the Bestseller Experiment, where we continue to discover what makes a bestseller and inspire you to start, finish and publish your book. I'm Mark DeVoe.
And I'm Mark Stay, and as always, a huge thank you to everyone who keeps this show going with their support. That includes our academies on the Bestseller Academy and our patrons over on Patreon. If you want to find out about the Academy and spend some time with me and Mr. D, it's academy.bestsellerexperiment.com. And if you want to support the podcast, and you know this podcast will always need supporting, you wonderful people, go to bestsellerexperiment.com/support. All sorts of extra stuff there. We've got some great deep dives coming soon, so check that out.
Absolutely. And Mr. Stay, how are you this week? I see you've got a new ebook for your mailing list. Like, you're just pumping them out here, left, right, and centre. Can't keep up.
Well, this is I got quite a few short stories that I give away. It's just something I like to do to build the Witches of Woodville universe. But this is my first comic book. So there's an artist I've known who's a friend of the family called Emily Stewart. And she has a wonderful drawing style that's a little bit Asterix, a little bit Tintin, Hergé, that kind of thing. It's very bright and colourful. And my wife used to do theatre with her mum. So we met again at a party earlier in the year. And I just said, I've had this idea for a comic book. Are you, and she's showing me her artwork. And I thought, this is perfect. It's absolutely perfect. So top secret over the summer, I wrote a 10-page comic book, which I sent to Emily. And she's done some amazing illustrations. And so, yeah, you can get it for free if you sign up to the Witches of Woodville newsletter. And there's all sorts of other free short stories there, some of them in audiobook too. So, yeah, it's been a really, really interesting experience writing for comics and seeing how it's come out. I've learned a lot from it. It was really good fun. That
sounds like a bit of a bucket list. Was that a bit of a bucket list?
It is a bit, yeah. No, yeah. I definitely like to. I definitely like to do more of it now. I've had a taste of it, and it's such a unique form. It's not, people often compare it to film, and it's not. It's definitely its own thing. It has its own way of telling stories. Just the juxtaposition of frames together and what happens between those panels. It's terrific stuff. But just to see someone like Emily bring it to life has been brilliant.
I think it's brilliant. I think it's really great to embrace trying out all these different forms of storytelling.
Oh, yeah.
And in some ways, doing a kind of a 10-page comic is a really great kind of introduction to trying it. Because I guess you must have massive appreciation now when you go in, you look through I know you're a big comic fan, you look at some of your big meaty comic tomes that you got, right? Those,
yeah.
I mean, thinking about the work that must go into something like that.
Yeah. I mean, this is like I say, a 10-page comic is me dipping a toe into this. And also, Emily got paid. She's got an hourly rate and I paid it. So this weren't cheap.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's not, is it? Illustrators are, worth their weight in gold, but they're also...
Absolutely, yeah. So when you pick up that comic book and you think, oh, it's so many pounds or whatever, just think of the hours of blood, sweat and tears that the artist put into that, not to mention the writer. And
then you think of one stage further, you go to animation on, those... 90-minute movies, and you think about the insane level of detail the animators do. Yeah, I think I once mentioned this on the podcast, but I met the guy who once his whole job was on one of the Batman no, it was a Star Wars movie,
right?
And for 2 years he just worked on the movement of a cloak of one of the people in one of the, I think Luke Skywalker in one of the fight scenes. 2 years, just getting that right.
I can believe that. Yeah,
utterly bonkers. That's exciting. Well, listen, if you're into comics or you're an author who's thinking, that's something I'd like to try, pop over to Mark's website, markstaywrites.com, is that right?
Yeah, or witchesofwoodville.com. I'll put a link in the show notes where you can check it out. Excellent
stuff. Fantastic. Well, Mr. Stay, I mean, we've had a lot going on here. I had a big day yesterday. I noticed you posted on Facebook about a certain birthday, and there was some interesting discussions that led. I had a decade birthday, folks, yesterday. It was one of those, for anyone else who's been there or coming up to one, it's an interesting time in your life. It's an interesting time. And the thing that's kind of funny is in the UK, for anyone who's not in the UK, so something I learned, Mark, moving to North America. In the UK, our school year runs from September to end of the summer, doesn't it? Mm. And as most school years do, but they put the students based, who are born, I think it's beginning of September. They're the oldest in the year, aren't they? And then it goes to kind of, the end of August. In Canada, it goes from January to the end of December. So it's completely different. So in Canada, I would have been one of the youngest, but in England, I was one of the oldest. And we always used to have half term during my birthday was always during half term, which is marvelous. But being one of the oldest, it does mean that I'm one of the first of our friend group to hit. And I was getting all these texts yesterday from all of our mutual friends about, oh my God, how does it feel? Everyone seems a bit depressed going up to a decade birthday, but I for anyone out there, I'm in a state now. I've passed it. I'm now officially 50, folks. I can't bloody believe that. But anyway, officially 50, and I'm going to celebrate it, because in the lead up to it, it was like, gosh, where are my 40s gone? Where's that whole decade gone? That was this overriding feel of like loss and grief and like. But you know what? I thought to myself, actually, you know, I'm banging on about all this like power of the mind. I thought I've got to change the way I look at this, because I should be thinking about how lucky I am to have had 50 years.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is I picked up a birthday card. I've been looking for like really inappropriate birthday cards for all of everyone else who's turning 50. So watch out, Mark, in your mail in the future. But there was this one that I found. It said, it was actually, unfortunately, it was for a 40th birthday. And it said, congratulations on reaching 40. And you opened up and inside, because if you lived in the 1700s, you'd already be dead.
Well,
and I thought, I know. Yeah. And then I heard the interview today and I thought, oh, that's an interesting, completely unrelated. So if you want to hear the link in today's interview where we talk about that, it's an amazing story. And in fact, Mark, we should just dive straight into that. Let's do that. So tell us about the return of Ed McDonald.
Yes, wonderful Ed McDonald. Now, Ed has been on the show before. He was on episode 105, where we linked to one of his blogs, which was Dear Debut Authors, which was great, honest blog about being a debut author and what he'd learned about that. And he's come back a few years later. He's got a new series. You know, we talk about his new book, Daughter of Redwinter, which is the first book in the Redwinter Chronicles. But we also we talk about some amazing stuff. What he deletes, 15% of what he writes, talks about creating magical systems, why doesn't do world building. We talk about the future of fantasy and grimdark, but also we talk about how a life-changing illness changed his perspective on life and his writing.
Yeah, you don't want to miss this, folks. It's really, really important stuff to listen to. So let's dive in and listen to Mark chatting with the wonderful Ed McDonald.
Ed McDonald, welcome back to the podcast. How are you today, sir?
I'm baking hot in it's a seasonal London heat wave, isn't it? But surprising weather. But other than that, I'm okay.
Good. It is interesting. You see Americans in particular stunned by the fact that we in the UK don't have air conditioning, because we would use it precisely 3 days of the year. But one of those days is now, isn't it?
It certainly is. Yeah. You really feel London's particularly bad because of all our concrete, isn't it? So we get more heat than anywhere else. And not the fun sort of heat either. No,
it's quite oppressive. Anyway, we are not here to talk about the weather, Ed, are we? We are here to talk about your magnificent new book, the first in the Redwinter Chronicles, Daughter of Redwinter. And this one really hits the ground running. Tell us about Daughter of Redwinter.
This is every author's nightmare. Explain what your book is about. So, Daughter of Redwinter is about a young woman who she's been choosing to travel with a kind of harmless New Age cult, I suppose you could call them. But they found themselves facing the wrath of the establishment, and they're holed up, besieged in a monastery. And Rain has an unusual gift in that she can, gift or curse, in that she can see the ghosts of the dead. And this isn't a very helpful ability. It doesn't really have any functional power, or it's more that if people discover that she has it, then the penalty for that is to be put to death, because they fear that people with this power will go on to sort of commit dark sorceries, which is, nothing of the sort on her mind. And she winds up being taken away after some trauma is experienced to the Fortress Monastery, where, now, you see, I wrote the word, and I don't really know how it should be pronounced. Listening to various pronunciations is either Dria or something along those lines. But in this world, I call them Drowin. But however anyone wants to pronounce what they're called. It's a fantasy book. It's a made-up word. You can say them how you like. I call them the Drowen. She's taken away by them and becomes embroiled in conspiracy to do with this forbidden power that she's stuck with.
Fantastic stuff. Let's take a moment, listeners, to think about the poor audiobook narrators who have to narrate fantasy novels with all these wonderful exotic names that we put out there. Yeah, great success with the Ravensmark trilogy, Blackwing, Ravencry, Crowfall, award nominations, fantastic reviews. And here you are starting with a new series. And I'm always fascinated by authors particularly fantasy authors who start with a new series, because you've got a new world to build. There's new magic systems, new characters. Was there any trepidation in starting over?
No, not really. I very much wanted to write something that was very, very different in terms of character and in terms of feel, I suppose. The Ravensmark series is, it's very nihilistic. It's almost a little schlocky in places. it's a little tongue-in-cheek. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of things which I put in to see, could I get away with including them in a fantasy novel? There's a power-armored Gatling gun at one point, and that was, I remember thinking at the time, I wonder if I'll be allowed to keep this in. Whereas Redwinter is a really different kind of book. It's much more introspective. I'd almost go as far as to say, although I kind of loathe the way the books get given certain subgenres, but it's a lot closer to literary fiction than it's in a way that Blackwing is a lot closer to a comic book.
Right.
So it's a lot more introspective. I think the character relationships form this very important focus, which I suppose they did in the Ravensmark, but in a different way. So less of a breakneck pace. And when it came to designing the world, I don't do world building. I don't do any at all. I never have. I just start writing the book,
right?
And I write what feels natural and comes naturally to me. And in the redrafts and the edits, that's when everything gets solidified and comes together. So I delete about 50% of everything I write. So there's I've just deleted the first 5 chapters of the second book and rewritten them from scratch with completely different events and different characters in them, because I felt that I didn't like what I read. So it's very easy to pen yourself in with world building, so that you feel, well, I've designed it this way, so it has to work by these rules. But there are no rules. You can just make it up. It's why I won't write historical fiction, because I'd hate to research a whole sequence of events and then feel I get to a point and think, but wouldn't it be better if this person was beheaded at this point and they lived another 30 years, So, no, I feel no fear of starting something new like that. Having said that, between the two series, I did write at least 200,000 words worth of false starts on projects that never got off the ground.
Wow. Okay. Let's unpack that. There's a couple of things to talk about there. One, I love the fact that you're. It's so refreshing to hear a fantasy author say, no world building beforehand, because I think there is, particularly when authors are starting out, they think, oh, crikey, I've got to create all this backstory like Tolkien had or whatever had. I have to do a kind of almost Dungeons and Dragons like rule book before I can even write the first chapter. And that's not always the case, is it? You can discover it as you go along and bend the rules and discover the world as your characters, negotiate it. But I love that you're willing to delete 50% of what you're writing. And has that become part of your process now? Has that become because a lot of people listen to that and have a heart attack, but we've spoken to authors before who've said, yeah, actually, I get about a third of the way in and then I know what it's about and I go back and start again. Is that kind of what you're doing?
I would love to imagine that the word process could be applied to anything I do. I start writing and I get a certain way in. And when I get a certain way in, and it could be a chapter or it could be 40,000 words, and then I'll just think, something's not working. And I wonder what it is. And then I'll go back and change. And I mean, with this... With Daughter of Redwinter, I got to 90,000 words before I thought to myself, there's no antagonist in this story. There's no villain. Everyone's having a great soap opera, but I don't know what the point of the book is. So I then went back to the beginning and I deleted the original beginning that I had, and I rewrote maybe the first 5 chapters from scratch, and then I worked my way forward, changing everything so that it all meshed up, and then. By the time I got to the end of the book at about 160,000 words, I thought, now I've figured out the point of the book. That's great. Now I know what happens. But the things I was writing about in the last quarter of the book, none of it makes sense right now because none of the setup is there for it. There were things I wanted to happen, but I hadn't put any of the things in which will allow them to. So I'm currently on a rewrite, making sure everything works. But this is how I do it. I work forward and then I go back and then I have to work forward from the back. And then it's sort of slowly building up inch by inch. And in the end, I get a book out of it. I can't really understand how anyone writes any other way. I just don't know how you make a plan and stick to it. Because how do you have your best ideas before you've lived with the characters and seen their relationships developing as you write? Or this is why I don't do world building. Why would I have my best ideas while I was sitting trying to think up a world rather than, let's say in the Raven's Mark, the reason there is neon lighting everywhere is because when I was describing them approaching the city, I thought how boring it seemed to describe. So I thought, I'm going to put in neon lights. That'll be good. I bet this will never get into the book. But then as soon as you put in neon lights, it's on a whim. But then there has to be a reason why that works in a fantasy setting. So you have to create the magic system back from the world to fill that in. And to me, it's a very organic process of it discovers itself as it goes along. I hate it when people say like all 3 things like that, isn't it? Yeah, the characters write their own stories. It's like I know they don't. I know it's all me, but
I like what you're saying though, because a lot of authors, particularly working in science fiction or fantasy, they say, "Oh, I love to discover the what if," but you seem to be asking, "Can I get away with this?" Which I think is a much more cheeky and exciting way of writing. Sort of thing. I'm going to chuck in this thing. I'm going to chuck in neon lightning. I'm going to chuck in magical Gatling guns. I think that's it's a great way to discover your world just by saying, let's have some fun with this.
Yeah, like what I want a lot of what I write is just what do I want to write today? Because if I'm enjoying it, then I tend to think other people will enjoy something about it. I have one sort of rule, which is that, and that this very much applies to Daughter of Redwinter, which is if your character has a magical ability, the resolution to the story must directly relate to the way that operates or the way it works. So it's very different to writing the Raven's Mark, because in Redwinter, Rain has a power, and the story can't just be resolved through a sword fight. It has to be resolved through that power being at the focus of everything that happens. Otherwise, why is it there?
Yeah.
It can't just be, it's not a video game where they just have random abilities that are useful. Whereas in Blackwing and the Raven's Mark, the protagonist doesn't have a magical power, which means that the story can't be resolved by him learning something new about magic. But if you're writing a story where someone is learning magical powers, I feel there's an onus of responsibility that those powers are the thing, because they're what are making it the fantasy. Otherwise, they could be something else. They could be completely different. It would be the same story. And it also I also feel like the character arc and their personal journey and what they learn about themselves has to directly tie in with the growth and development and use of those abilities. So the starting point for Redwinter, and this is it. Redwinter is a rewrite of a novel I trunked back in 2012, a complete rewrite from scratch. But the initial standing point was, what if you had Sauron's powers, but you didn't want to be Sauron, but everyone else was nuts, and you had to stop them for their own good. And it's progressed and evolved a long way from there. But that's why Rain has the powers she does. What happens if everyone considers these abilities you have innately to be evil? And in fairness, you can only really do quite evil things with them, but they're all you got.
I love the idea that, again, you're working on an idea, then you're trunking it, but it doesn't quite die. You know, there's something there. Was it a case of you putting this away, working on the Ravensmark trilogy, and then coming back to it? Were you sifting through old ideas, or was this the idea that just wouldn't go away?
Well, so what happened originally was I wrote this novel and it was 280,000 words. It was a huge doorstopper. And an agent told me, it's too long to be published. No one's going to give a new author a book deal for that. So I thought, right, I've got to write something shorter. And that's when I wrote Blackwing. And, you know, many years on, I didn't want to go back to it. I wasn't planning to. And then I was trying out new things, and I tried idea after idea. And I had one book about snakes, which were as wide as the Empire State Building is tall, going around the Earth. And I had another one about almost like a samurai Western. And I had another one about the Hunger Games, but in a Colosseum. One about spider tanks. And one about the First World War magical trench warfare. And I tried out idea after idea after idea. And none of them was sticking with me. I wasn't enjoying any of them. Some of them I got really far with. I got about 100,000 words into one of them. And, you know, that's a full novel length. And I got 50,000 words into a couple of others. And I just didn't think any of them were good. And me and my partner were in France on holiday, and our sort of holiday is we go somewhere and then sit individually and write for the whole time we're there. But I was lying in the pool on one of those inflatable beds, staring up at the sky, kind of despairing at my complete inability to write anything. And it had been about a year and a half since I finished writing Ravensmark. And I just thought, I'm just going to dig back through some old stuff. And I picked out the old book, and I thought, you know, maybe there's something. Can I chop it in half? Or can I at least take the best bits and do something? And I started working on it. And very quickly it became apparent that the character who I'd written then was kind of, back in 2012, had been a kind of reflection of me in my later teens and 20s. But there was this new character who really wanted to come through and completely change things. So I was like, well, I'm going to have to gender flip the main character. I'd written this from a male perspective. And I thought, no, you know what? I've spent so much time changing and rewriting in the last couple of years. I'm just going to hold back. And for 3 days, I held myself back from doing it. And then I was like, nope, doing it. And you know, I know the characters don't really exist, but there was a sort of feeling of this character. It was her story that was going to get told, and I think the truth of that is probably that Brain, the protagonist of Redwinter, is a reflection of experiences and traumas and life that I've experienced in my 30s, as well as my 20s and my teens. And she's an amalgamation of all those things come together, along with, you know, combined with a lot of late night conversations during lockdowns and all manner of learning. And she kind of, or that part of my subconscious insisted that it was her story. And so, like, the magic system got kept, the the ghosts got kept, and pretty much nothing else from that trunk novel got kept. So the central themes remained, but she just took it over and just like made it a completely new novel.
Fantastic. And it's interesting that you've got a young female protagonist. Was some of that anything to do with the sort of the changing landscape of fantasy? Because certainly when Blackwing was first published, we were at sort of peak grimdark, I would say, and we're now seeing, a kind of almost not a softening, I guess, but there seems to be a bit more light and shade in fantasy these days. Did Rain come around because of that?
Well, I certainly wasn't conscious of it, but I think that there was certainly, as you say, a time when grimdark ruled the roost, and grimdark was all over. And I think eventually it just gets tiring. There's only so many old men of violence you can read before they kind of start blurring into one. And I'd done the old men of violence. I'd written that. For me, I wanted to write a character who was perhaps on a more hopeful course, but I also just wanted to write a really different character experience. So Ravensmark Galharrow he's 40 in the first one, 50 in the last book, but he's got a long, sordid, dark past to reflect on. Mm. And Rain is young, she's 17. And perhaps that ties in with the audience as well, with various things going on in the world, perhaps just having had enough of relentless nihilism and bleakness, which, I love. I absolutely love that. But then I've always said, my books have always been solved with the power of love and friendship. But I think we certainly saw a shift from people wanting to indulge in grimdark, because there comes a point in any trend where it starts parodying itself.
Yeah.
The term itself was originally a sort of self-mocking term, and then by the time you're 7, 8 years into the subgenre, people who've grown up on grimdark books don't realise perhaps that it's a joke, and really all the best grimdark stuff is tongue-in-cheek, and like it knows that it's a little over the top and a little bit camp, even if you go that far. But then it starts becoming this serious thing where people take all the bleakness and all the darkness and all the high levels of violence and brutality and forget the campness and forget the absurdist humor. I think Joe Abercrombie is a great example of if you read his latest series, it's a commentary on Brexit.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like 2000 AD comic used to do all the Judge Dredd stuff. Used to do this tremendously well. Where in this totally bleak, relentlessly awful future, it's all sort of hilarious.
Oh yeah.
It's meant to be funny that he's judge, jury, and executioner, because that's absurd. But then when I was a kid, I didn't get it. I thought he was like a superhero like any other. And I think we got that with grimdark. But I also think we at the same time got a bit of a wave where I think the market force in the audience started insisting upon a more diverse array of fantasy. And publishers, will respond to try and give the audience what they want once someone has proved it can be done. So Rebecca, here's a great example of this that everyone will get, actually. The movie Bridesmaids. There'd never been an all-female-led comedy before. And before that, everyone had said, it can't be done. No one will go and see it. And of course, then as soon as it works once, everyone piles onto the bandwagon, and suddenly they're all very, oh yes, we're so pro films with women in. But they weren't, were they? They weren't before. So as soon as someone proves that it can be done, everyone is happy to publish, and so we've seen great progress made in publishing a more diverse array of authors. and more diverse fantasy settings. And sure, there have always been the occasional book set in, a fantasy version of the Middle East, for instance. But now I would say it's gone from that is the book about the fantasy Middle East to there are books about and it's not a gimmick. It's not, which is great. But of course, what's happened as well is we've carried through a lot of the things that we can have learned from enjoying the grimdark wave. More morally dubious characters, less clearly defined lines between who's the hero and who's the villain. And so I think that as each wave pushes forward, it inevitably crests. And then as the readership starts taking on the zeitgeist of whatever it is they really want to see next, all the good of those lessons from those trends gets carried forward with it. So I don't know what the next thing is going to be. I certainly know that if I think back to reading Richard Morgan's The Steel Remains when I was a teenager, my mum had got that for me for Christmas. And it was the first book I ever read that had a very clearly gay protagonist. And thinking, when I was reading it, back in the, it may be hard for young people to know this nowadays, but back in 1997, when I'd have been reading that, people did not have the acceptance of the way that we do now of LGBT people or content in media. It was shocking, and that's not that long ago. But now, what I think we see in fantasy is that the fantasy readership wants the landscape in their fantasy books to be reflective of the world they live in. And we live in places surrounded by LGBT people. So it's not a gimmick. It's just, there are just LGBT characters and they are the main characters or they are not. And I think we're seeing fantastic progress across the board in so many ways in fantasy. I only wish I could guess what the next trend was going to be in 3 years' time and take a shot at jumping on it. But that wouldn't work. That never works.
No, I know what you mean. I think Still Remains was later than I was at Orion when that came out. That could even be 2003 onwards.
Is that right?
Anyway, yeah.
That right?
Yeah, I think it is. But anyway, I want to talk about something that I hope you're okay to talk about. But I know at Christmas 2021, you were very ill. And from the looks of things, it was pretty dicey. And listeners out there, we have people who have had similar situations, and we're always interested in how it affects authors and their perspective on writing and how it might change their writing. Can you tell us about what happened last Christmas?
Sure. So I had a 4-day onset of a nerve disorder called Guillain-Barré syndrome, or GBS. GBS is a nerve disorder that affects about 1 in 100,000 people, and it affects them in varying degrees of severity. So Jenna Jameson had it at the same time that I did, interestingly. So in her case, she lost the ability to walk temporarily. For me, I lost basically every nerve in my body ceased functioning. So over 4 days, I lost the ability to walk, to move my arms, and eventually to breathe. So I went into hospital, and I arrived in A&E, unable to really move anything. I could move my arms from the elbows down, and I could move. I could still speak. And a lovely, amazing NH doctor just looked at me, and she just said, "Oh, it's GBS. We get one case in hospital per year." And so, then I was in intensive care for about a week. They pumped me full of fentanyl, ketamine, I think I was on 7 different painkillers at one point, which gave me the most trippy, weird, sci-fi experience of my life. I thought I was on a spaceship in a dead universe where I was the only living human for a while. For about 4 days, I thought that. And then, they treated me with something called in vitro immunoglobulin, which basically is putting clean blood into you that restart, because GBS it's where your own nervous system eats your own nerves. If your nerves are wires, then your immune system eats the plastic coating around the wires, and then none of them work. And then my body regrew it. But I was then in rehab, a neurological rehab ward for a while. But I was tremendously lucky, because most people who suffer this are in hospital for somewhere around 6 months to a year. And I managed to get out of hospital in under a month.
Wow.
And no one knows why. No one knows why I came back so quickly. I'm almost back at full strength. I'm not quite, but I sometimes say it's a bit like stepping on a chihuahua poo, because like you never want to step on a dog poo, but like at least it was a small one. That was. That's how we spent Christmas, and of course, no one could. Well, I could have one visitor a day for 1 hour, because COVID. So my partner would come in. She'd travel an hour to get there, spend an hour with me, through which I would be in varying stages of lucidity, and then have to travel off home. So that was how we spent Christmas Day, and strangest thing that's ever happened in my life, certainly. And it's where I lose the medieval death game. It's where if I was born 600 years ago, that's where I finish.
Right,
that's where I died. Yeah.
God. How did that change your perspective on life, on writing, on your work, on what you write about? I mean, I assume Daughter of Redwinter was already sort of done and dusted, or at least in the edit stage at that point. But has it changed? You know, when you sit down at the desk, has it changed how you write things? Are you thinking, right, I'm not having a day off. I'm not, I'm getting on with it. The clock is ticking. Did it change that at all?
So there's a combo of two things. One is it hammers home just how important it is to do everything now, just to go for it, work on it now, do everything that you can absolutely do, because the GBS it comes about from you're supposed to have some kind of respiratory infection, and then a week or so later GBS develops, and no one knows why that is either. No one knows what the connection is. But it's very, very common those two things happen. And I didn't. So effectively, it just came out the blue. It was a thunderbolt of 4 very confusing days where the first ambulance wouldn't take me. Private doctor came out at 3 a.m. He said I was fine. I just needed to take some vitamins and sleep. And then the second ambulance eventually did take me. But it does make me think just to get on and do. And certainly in the second of the Redwinter books, I've written certain elements of that experience into things that happen in that book. I don't think you can go through something like that and be unchanged. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I think I'm too... I don't know what the word is exactly. I would resent it too much if I allowed something like that to have a significant impact on my life for very long. I refuse to let it win, and I'm sure that there are long-lasting after effects that I'll be finding for years to come. I still have one of the after effects is in my hands, my fingers either go numb, tingle, burn, feet as well. And so a couple of nights ago, I was waking up, and every time I woke up, both of my hands would have gone dead, and I have to shake feeling back into them. It's also high levels of fatigue. My legs aren't as strong as they used to be, but these are all things that I just have to sort of adapt to and live with, because they likely won't go away. but I'm aware how lucky I was to recover and to be supported as I was by my partner and my family. And it's made my family. We've always been we've always been close, but one of those close families who also doesn't necessarily make the right amount of time to see each other because we all have very busy lives. And so the one positive that's come out of it is that I think we all make more effort to make sure that we make that time. Yeah.
Well, Ed, we are immensely grateful that you made it through that, which must have been absolutely terrifying.
Shout out to the NHS, who are the most NHS workers, the most incredible people you'll ever meet.
Absolutely. So say we all. Ed, what's coming next from you? You mentioned book 2. There's is it a trilogy, the Redwinter Chronicles?
Well, it's a series, and there are 3 in the series under contract.
Right.
Depending how things go in the next few weeks, if my publishers were to come back to me and say, "How do you think about going to 5 or 7?" Then it's a different story that you tell if it's going to be that long. But I wouldn't be averse. I have ideas for a couple of standalones. I have a contemporary thriller I'd like to write, but I'm also hoping to be able to try and write some audio drama, and maybe even a screenplay. Yeah. So, but at the moment, it's one of those. The Redwinter Chronicles need writing, so that is where all the energy goes right now.
Wonderful stuff. Ed McDonald, thank you so much for speaking to us, and hope to speak to you again real soon.
Thanks so much.
What are your writing dreams? Finishing that book, quitting the day job, becoming a best-selling author? Well, over 4 years, we've studied the advice of over 300 best-selling authors who've collectively sold over 500 million books. And we are excited to announce the Bestseller Academy. If you're ready to take your writing to the next level with accountability, craft, and coaching, your bestseller dreams are now only a click away. To find out more and apply, visit bestsellerexperiment.com/academy. That's bestsellerexperiment.com/academy. So, Mark, we can't really dive into this interview without kind of acknowledging, obviously, what Ed had been through. And it's, I'm really glad that he was able to talk about it, because I think for some people it can be quite a harrowing experience. But I can imagine for Ed, it's changed his life forever, hasn't it? I mean, you can't ever go through something like that and look in the world with the same pair of eyes.
I love the perspective that he had. He said it's like stepping in Chihuahua poo. At least it's a small one. Which I think is such a great way to think of it. And he refuses to let it win as well, But I think, we talked about the medieval death game. I mean, that's something I probably would have lost when I was a toddler. I had convulsions when I was a toddler, so I'd have probably swallowed my tongue or been burned as a witch or something. So I'd have lost that if it wasn't for modern medicine. But it's I'm constantly thinking I'm going to drop dead any minute now. So this thing of go for it, work on it now, do everything you can. That's what drives me, a probably quite unhealthy sense of my own mortality.
No, but I think it's actually this is the funny thing. Everyone talks about an unhealthy sense or a fear of death. I think it's one of the most important motivations we should have in life, and particularly when we talk about writing, because, and I've said this many times, like what we put down on paper, what we tap on the keyboard, lives beyond us, and there is a sense of our ability to, through our words and our ideas that we want to put down on paper and our themes and stories that we want to talk about, I do really believe this. I really believe they become the most important thing that we leave behind. And I can say that from personal experience as well, because I had this incredible sense of wanting to read things that my wife had written after she passed away. I was looking for like notebooks and every time I found a piece of paper that had something with her handwriting on it or something written down, it was incredibly precious, and it in some way connected us in many ways to her essence, her voice, that thing that was living, before she passed. And even now, in that 4 or 5 years down the road, I will still find things. Like I found a gratitude journal the other day, which was just like mind blowing. All the things she was grateful for, and I was like, oh my gosh. And so I think for anyone who's experienced this, and strangely enough, we had someone join the academy who almost died of COVID, and they said to me the reason they joined the academy is that they said, I can't wait. I can't put this off. I've been putting this off all my life. I've got to do this now. So, Ed's story is such a powerful reminder of that thing that we kind of forget in day-to-day life when we get through, you wake up, you got all your problems in front of you, you got all your emails and we forget that actually this is another day where we get to do this. We get to maybe write a few words, and it's good to remember.
I think lockdown has, as well in its own way, affected everyone. What did people do when they didn't have to work for a living? They were baking, they were writing, they were making music, growing vegetables. They were doing the things they don't have to do when they're not hunched over a laptop in an office or wherever they might be working. And I think we've all of us to some extent have discovered that I want to do more of the thing that I love. Because we only get one shot at this,
Totally, yeah. As they say, it's not a dress rehearsal, right? And the other thing is that it's two things. It's doing what we love, doing what we have a passion for. Because when we're doing what we have a passion for, we do our very best work. And when you add that up over a lifetime, like who doesn't want to have a life of their very best work? Yeah. Most people, should be asking them that question daily. But the second thing is that when we do our very best work, when we're doing what we're passionate about, we're influencing and changing the world in a different way than if we just showed up to just run an ordinary run of the life mill, a life where we're out there consuming rather than creating, or just consuming rather than creating and contributing. And I always do. I mean, I get very philosophical a lot, but I get very philosophical around 50th birthdays as well. Right, it's a good opportunity.
Yeah.
Right. So I spent the whole of yesterday just journaling and thinking about like the importance of life and the importance of the days that we have, and we don't talk about it enough because I think people are a bit kind of embarrassed to admit maybe that this actually is really important to them. I salute what Ed's doing. I salute that he's cracking on, right, and getting on with it. I salute you, Mark, having this kind of, unhealthy fear of mortality, how you put it. I think that's brilliant. And I just want to encourage anyone listening today who this touches in some way to just spend a few moments a day just sitting down, even if it's just sitting quietly somewhere. Get yourself away from everyone. Just go and sit in a quiet space. Or if you like to journal, sit with your book and ask yourself what you want to do with the rest of your life. Because at some point, we should be asking ourselves that question almost on a daily basis. But there are moments in your life where you should actually stop. And not on New Year's Eve when you're drinking champagne and thinking, where did the year go? Like, do it away from New Year's Eve. Do it. Just pick a random afternoon. Today's as beautiful as every other day in your life, ultimately. So sit down and write a page about what you would like to contribute through your writing, what you'd like your life to mean to the people that will learn from whatever journey you go on in the future, the future generations that will follow you. And all those people are going to pick up your words who never ever met you, 200-300 years down the road. We've always said this, but like, what would we have given to have our grandparents, great-great-great-grandparents' diaries and journals and thoughts and understanding about their world? Because that connects us in a heartfelt sense to someone who was part of our family even. And
well, I think I've mentioned this before, but whenever I've got together with my parents, I've recorded their conversations, particularly if they've had some drinks, because I want them to tell their stories because they've got some great stories, and I want to get those down before while I can still get those stories, and I've got them, I've recorded them, they're filed away safely, I could transcribe them or whatever. I've already played some of it to my kids, and they're like gobsmacked, like, really? Yeah, that's Granddad, you know. You know, it is important to capture as much of this as you can, because it's also fleeting, you know. And once they're gone, those stories are gone. You know, they only they could tell them. So yeah, it's something very much on my mind as I reach the peak of the 50 roller coaster. I can see it all. There it is in February. Right, see you there.
Right. Do you know what's super awesome, Mark, is that my I've got this really weird thing in my family. It's not weird, but it's just interesting that a lot of my family are decades apart. It's so cool. So my daughter is 3 decades younger than me. My grandmother turned 100 this year. She's double. We're now exactly double the age, and she's still living. She's still rocking and rolling, 100%.
Wow,
there. It's amazing. My dad is 30 years older than me, and he turns 80 in less than a couple of weeks.
Right.
And talking about recording, he once recorded the life story of my grandfather, which it's on audio. Wow. It's absolutely incredible, like a family heirloom, right? On a tape, and we digitized it. But I also was inspired then. I would start recording things like Christmas dinners. It was a bit cheeky once. I once hid a mini disc recorder and a microphone.
Brilliant.
At the top of the cabinet in the dining room where we had Christmas dinner once, when all the kids were tiny. They were like 1 and 2 years old. And my dad would always put on this amazing Christmas dinner and light the Christmas pudding and all that, half a bottle of whiskey going on it. And moments like that, to have those, even just to capture the ambience of a family get together, and without people. I mean, I know you should ask people's permission, but it's like with kids. The minute you hold up a video camera,
they change.
Yeah, they're like, ooh, stop. They just can't get any sense out of them. And it's the same with people when they know they're being recorded. They'll be very careful about what they say, but just to get that kind of ambience of a Christmas dinner, don't wait until parents or friends become old, or something happens to them, or they get an illness, and then you suddenly think, I want to do it now. Do it whilst they're healthy. If you're going for a cup of coffee with a best friend, put your phone down on the table. Say, hey, do you mind if we just kind of record this? I just want to like do it now, because it's such an important thing to capture, and you never know where those stories may transpire in the future. They might become a major inspiration.
That's what I was thinking. I mean, the thing is, if you're recording people without their permission, there's all kinds of moral questions about that. But you're not. It goes away. It's archived. You don't listen to it. You don't. It's like in a way, it is a bit like keeping a diary. But your children's children could find that Christmas thing and go, I'm going to write a story about this. I'm going to try, or I'm going to discover more about this.
Just one
not for
thing.
Us. It's not for us. It's for another generation to come.
One thing that's said that sparks an idea. I think that's brilliant. But I think actually, I mean, I talk about asking permission. I think obviously you always ask permission when you're recording audio, unless you want to play a prank on your family. But what I will say is, if you are going to record, it's actually easier just to put the phone and that little voice memo thing on the Apple iPhone. It's brilliant. It's great. I find that, and you've known this, Mark, as well, interviewing people, when you're recording people, if you ask them, do you mind if I record? And once you put the phone down, you say, yeah, just ignore it. It's not. And once it's there, people forget about it, out of sight, out of mind. I think video cameras are the things that change the nature of people. So I think use just audio. Audio is brilliant, because it's a bit like reading a book. You imagine the seat that they're sitting in, you hear noises in the background, you think, what's that noise? So I think, again, encouraging people just to turn on and start recording. I think it's one of the best things that we can do.
Yeah, agreed.
Now, Ed also talked about having fun with his writing as well, didn't he? I mean, and he talked about this journey of, it's getting interesting talking about this now, but like violence and grimdark, and how his characters, this juxtaposition of how his characters always win through the power of love and friendship. So there's this really interesting kind of like battle going on, isn't there, which we can see out in the world today even. But
well, I mean, this the fantasy sort of grimdark genre is one of my favorite things to read as well. I really enjoy it. But I think you'll find, with Ed's books, there is violence, and there are terrible things happening to people. And he mentioned Joe Abercrombie there as well. but you will find so much compassion in that writing, because we want to put our characters through hell to test them and bring them out the other side as better people. And it's interesting to see how the genre has evolved. I mean, we were talking, he mentioned Joe's new trilogy, which essentially is kind of, he said it was about Brexit, but it's also about a society changing and realizing the unfairness in society, the sort of the gaps between rich and poor. These are the ideas pursued by authors who care about people and care about society and are asking really, really big questions. And this is one of the things I love that fantasy can do and can address, and science fiction as well. These genres can take on these massive ideas and, spatter the walls of blood, but also make you think. And I love how that's progressing. And it's interesting to see that happen with Ed's writing as we go through life and we get all kinds of knockbacks and trials and tribulations. It can't help but change the way that we write as people. It can't, I look at stuff I wrote in my early 20s and kind of when I hadn't really done much with my life and certainly hadn't been, had any kind of trauma in my life. And it's got a swagger and it's cocky and it's fun, but it's kind of paper thin as well. And I think once you get through life and get a few cuts and bruises, it the blood seeps onto the page.
And I think it's really interesting as well how, despite the gore and obviously that a lot of the fantasy genres are all about how many limbs can you cut off, and but it's interesting as well that despite all that, love and friendship always it wins the day. I mean, whether it's a Disney movie, whether it's a grimdark novel, again, we saw it like classics like Lord of the Rings. And I think it's really, it's a hopeful thing for us in our times right now, whilst we go through the realities of those kind of war scenarios kind of being played out in the world right now. It's the thing that we all cling and hope to. The power of love and friendship can actually, or reconciliation, if you like, can actually, win the day at the end of it all.
I mean, the thing with grimdark is the thing is the good guys will die, the good guys will lose. It doesn't always win the day. But you sitting there reading it in your cozy living room, or feet up on a sofa with a cup of tea, or wherever you might be reading your book. The unfairness of some of these storylines where people you love do get, hacked down in their prime or whatever, it provokes thought in you about the world around you and how unfair it can be sometimes. And I don't know about you, but when I read something like that, it makes me want to be a better person. It makes me want to look out for injustices in the world. So by having that, this is the same thing with horror movies as well. Horror movies, we hold up a mirror that shows humanity perhaps at its worst and doing terrible things. But it kind of, there's a cathartic thing there where you come through the other side and think, well, I'm not going to be that person. I'm going to be a better person as a result. And that I get that a lot. It can put a fire in my belly. I can think, damn, this is unfair. What can I do to make the world a better place? So, I know that sounds weird, and
no, not at all. That doesn't sound weird one bit. It sounds absolutely essential. It really does. I think that writing and stories is a way of working through some of those thoughts, and as writers, we can make a better world through our writing. But also, we still need to be out in the world making a better world. As citizens, as people. I'll show you something that this is really, really kind of dear to my heart right now. Yesterday, my kids, for my 50th birthday present, I was like, what would be the best present? And for me, I wanted something that was a reminder, daily reminder for me moving forward about the importance of going out there and trying to make the world a better place. And doing that by reminding myself that it needs to start with me. It has to start with me. So I had two of my kids draw on my hand. You ready for this? that. And what's really interesting is I carried that around with me yesterday and it started to fade. And I thought, interesting. And so I had to get it redone again today before they went to school. But I see it all the time. It's weird, like it's there all the time. And
so for audio listeners, tell us what's on the palm of your hand.
So one of the kids drew an outline of a heart on the palm of my hand, quite large, almost the whole of the palm. And my daughter then coloured it in red. So this could be the beginning of something, Mark. I haven't fully thought it out, but I had a bit of a dreaming. What would I call it? A waking dream. Do you know that point between when you're asleep and when you're waking up and you start getting this really incredible stream of consciousness?
Yep.
Right. No, so I had a lot of, I call it a download or a dumping. And I've had it yesterday and I had it today and I'm working on something to do with this.
Call it a dumping.
Yeah, don't call it a dumping. That's probably but I'm going to share this over the next week or two when I want to put together. But there's something that I want people to take from this. And it links to everything that we've talked about, about, love and friendship winning the day. And I think I'm just feeling this incredible sense that whether it's through our words or our actions in the world right now, we need to step up. We need to step up as not as countries, but as individuals. Yeah. Because that's part of the problem. The boundaries, anyway, I won't go too much into that because it's a much
very
bigger
reflective mood. I
know. Well, this is actually I'm like this most of the time. It's just that there's moments where it all just kind of comes together. But watch this space. I'll talk a bit more about it on next week's podcast if people are interested in finding out a bit more. But I need to just document what I've been. When you need to kind of like just write it all down and just look at it and say what is this? But there is something there. But anyway. Thank you so much to Ed. And if you've found this interesting, we have got more that we want to chat about with Ed because there is too much to cover on this podcast. So if you'd like to listen to the extended edition of this podcast, we are going to talk about being brave and chopping your words. And we're going to go into a bit of an interesting discussion around themes versus ideas and how, Ed was trying out ideas, writing 280,000 words. We're going to kind of delve into that and talk about what that means if you're finding yourself in that place. So if you'd like to listen to the extended edition of this podcast, it's available to all patrons and Academy members. So as Mark mentioned earlier, pop along to the website and sign up to either one of those. There is so much more to talk about. If you like any of this kind of chat with me and Mark, this is kind of what you get in the Academy coaching wise as well. So we're going to talk a little bit more about another Academy member who has got some experiences that they've had.
Yes, this is our weekly chat with one of our academics. So we talked to Wendy Koth, who writes science fiction fantasy. She, in her teens, she consumes science fiction anthology. She reads science fiction from all over. She lives in London and she's working on Chantilly Yogurt, which is a debut novel, which is a sort of romance, lighthearted, speculative romance set in contemporary London. But I had a quick chat with Wendy to talk about her experiences in the Academy. Wendy Koth, welcome to the podcast, and thank you for being such a long-standing supporter of the podcast and the Academy. And well, look, let's talk about the Academy. What were your big writing challenges before you joined the Academy?
Oh, gosh. Well, I think I suffered probably from a lack of confidence, really, and a lack of commitment. I had lots of writing, lots of work, but I didn't kind of really know what to do with it. And ideas just going around in my head and no sort of plan or no sort of view as to what was to come next, really. So I probably wasn't taking my writing very seriously.
Right.
And I think, I needed a focus. I needed somewhere to go with it. It was either a case of do something with it or, walk away.
Really? Okay. And how would you say the Academy has helped you as a writer?
Well, I think it's done. I mean, it's great one for encouraging regular writing habits. So it gave me that focus. It gives you a point of reference, really. It gives you something to look at and say, here, this is what you're part of. This is what you've got to work towards. These are people that are in the same position as you.
Right.
And I think also the fact that it's got a lot of good resources on the website and you can go into the courses, check them repeatedly. So anytime you're stuck, there's always an answer somewhere to be found. I think also there's a great sense of community, really, with all the other people, all the other academates. They've got such a wealth of experience and ideas, and they're in the same boat as I am, more or less. Well, everybody's on a different level, naturally, but, their stories are inspirational, and you feel great when they succeed at something, and you think, oh, it could be me next, So it's just encouraging to be part of that community, really. Nice. And as everybody always says, writing can be a lonely business, so it's nice to have the team on site with you, as if you want to sort of think of it like that.
Fantastic. And do you have a favourite part of the Academy? You mentioned the courses, you mentioned the community. Is there a favourite part that you come back to?
Well, I would have to say, without a doubt, it's the monthly Zoom workshops that you and Mark do. I mean, they're just so inspirational, really. I think the peer review are so, close your ears, here comes
We'll cut this bit, don't worry.
The peer reviewer is so enthusiastic and so genuinely really interested in what you're doing and helping people. And you two seem to have so much fun doing it. So how could, everybody not fail to get wrapped up in all of that as well, really? So definitely I would say it's nice to feel part of that, and nice to have that in your diary and something to look forward to. And I think if one of my sort of aims is to get my book onto your shelves, Mark. So.
Yes, it's over there. There's a space. I'm waiting for it. So tell us, what are you working on? Pitch yourself. Pitch a new project. What's coming from Wendy?
Well, I've been working on a 3-book series. Really, it's a kind of urban fantasy stroke contemporary romance, if you like. It's about an alien shapeshifter who comes to Earth on a mission to help save her planet, as they always are, save her race from extinction. And of course, she's a shapeshifter, so she can change her appearance to be whatever she wants. She falls in love with our male hero, and it's a kind of story about appearances and how we judge people on their appearances, and when she eventually confesses to him, how does he feel? Does he feel betrayed and that she's not the person he thought she was, apart from obviously being gobsmacked that she's an alien? That's just a small
that doesn't happen to you every week, Wendy. I mean, I'm constantly bumping it. It's like Men in Black around it. That sounds absolutely brilliant. Wendy, thank you so much for speaking to us, and I'll see you at the next craft coaching.
Great, Mark. Thank you for talking to me.
Fantastic. And if what Wendy's been talking about excites you, then pop along and find out more about the Academy, academy.bestsellerexperiment.com. Now, Mark, tell us about what's happening on the socials and wins this week.
We've got some great stuff. We've got people publishing novels, which is wonderful, which is what this podcast is all about, taking people who've listened to the podcast, getting their words out there. We had a lovely note from E.J. Towler, who says, my second novel is up on Amazon, release date January 9th, 2023. So it's coming soon. It's available for pre-order. It's called One Little Lie by E.J. Towler. And, this is a saucy one as well. So the premise is, what if you discovered the man you trusted above all others has a secret life? Attorney J.D. Ellis's world begins an inward spiral when her fiancé is arrested for murder and his secret life as a BDSM master is revealed. Fantastic stuff. Brilliant. Good luck with that, E.J. Towler. Fantastic. Got everything crossed for that. Ross James got in touch as well. At the other end of the spectrum, really. Ross said, hello, experiments. I've gone and dabbled in a new genre and written a children's picture book. I'm making it a free download on the mighty Amazon tomorrow, and I'd be delighted if you availed yourself of a copy. Enjoy it. It's called The Giants of South Georgia. It's Ross James with Olga Volgina illustrating. It looks absolutely beautiful. It's a rhyming children's story about the heroes of our planet. I'll put a link in the show notes to both of these so you can check those both out. And not exactly a win, but we had a note from Thomas Dunn, who's one of our people doing 200 words a day, hashtag 200 words a day, who's at Tommy Dunn Author on Twitter. Thomas said, I need to post something else except my word count each night. Will my scary eyes do after my heart attack and 2 cardiac arrests? Wish I could have kept them for Halloween. And Thomas has put a picture up on Twitter of his bloodshot eyes. Thomas, man.
Unbelievable.
Wow. I mean, we were talking about, close calls earlier. Got everything crossed for you, Thomas. Hope you're getting, the best care and attention, and hope you're on the road to a full recovery soon. Our best wishes to you and yours, man.
Yeah, absolutely, Thomas. Our heart goes out to you, but thank you for sharing that with us as well. And to everyone else out there who's in hospital, maybe listening to this podcast or going through hard times, we are with you all the way, and we send you our love and best wishes.
Right, so folks, if you want to get in touch, we're on social media. Drop us a line. Facebook is Bestseller Experiment. Twitter and Instagram is @BestsellerXP. And if you pop over to bestsellerexperiment.com, there is a contact tab there. You can email us there.
Absolutely. And don't forget the Bestseller Experiment newsletter, our weekly newsletter by email, if you'd like to find out what's coming up, what you may have missed, and all kinds of interesting things. Pop along to the website, bestsellerexperiment.com, click on the newsletter tab. And whilst you're there, if you want to drop us a note, you can just click on the contact button. Tell us about how the podcast is helping you. Tell us a fun story. Tell us about a new book you've got coming out. We'd love to find out more. And also, folks, remember, if you want to get the habit of writing for a lifetime, the 200-word challenge is for you. It's 200wordchallenge.com. Try it and see if you can get a 5-day writing streak, a 7-day writing streak. See where that might lead you with your writing. Let's say we haven't warned the Mark. We've heard some incredible stories, so do go and try that out. But folks, thank you so much again to Ed McDonald for coming on the show again, and for all of your wonderful emails and inspiration and all the words that you're going to be sharing with people. If you will tell them about this podcast as well, because if you know someone that might benefit from hearing today's show in particular, please do forward it on to them. We'd really, really appreciate that. So, Mr. Stay, best of luck with your comic launch and all of that. I hope that goes really well, and I'm really looking forward to chatting with you again this time next week. So it's a goodbye from Mark 1.
And a goodbye from Mark 2.
Goodbye.